It's time again, folks. Last year I made a video about cut content found within a variety of Puyo Puyo games, which itself was a sequel to another video about Puyo Puyo cut content. And since then, even more things of interest have been found in a bunch of different Puyo games, as well as a couple of Madou Monogatari games. So join me once again as we delve into the cut, early, scrapped, and unused material from a bunch more Puyo Puyo games. Can you believe it, we're beginning with Puyo Puyo 1 for the Mega Drive again. In the first video in this series, I brought up the undumped prototype build of the game, which contained an unused opening and mid-game cutscene, neither of which were found in the files to the final game. The opening cutscene was recorded and uploaded online by the current owner of the prototype, but the second one wasn't and remained shrouded in mystery. The only reason we knew of the second unused cutscene's existence was because, as I discussed in the second video in this series, the music track that was used for the cutscene was left in the files to the final game. However, I've been informed since then that 2 screenshots of this elusive cutscene do exist online. It's not confirmed as to where these originated from, but it's likely these actually came from the listing photos to the original sale of the prototype on Yahoo Japan auctions. These 2 screenshots seem to depict Arl running while Puyos, as well as Carbuncle, fall from the sky. The text in the first image reads, "The Puyos just kept on raining down." Hopefully someday, that proto will get into the hands of someone who'll dump it online, and we'll all get to see this cutscene properly. The next game to be discussed is actually a Madou game. This time we're looking at Madou Monogatari ARS for the PC-98. Some pre-release material was discovered and translated last year, and it's pretty interesting to me, so I'll be going over it now. So, in the September 1993 issue of this magazine called Technopolis, there was some very early coverage on the game, which reportedly planned on having Arl be 5 during the game, Rulu being 12, and Shezo being 15. In the final game, Arl is instead 4, Rulu is 16, and Shezo is 14. Not sure why all those ages were changed, but there you go. Also stated is that Rulu's combat style had yet to be decided, which I haven't actually played Madou ARS since it hasn't received a fan translation patch as of yet, so forgive this potentially inaccurate description, but to my understanding, Rulu sorta just punches a lot and has no magic and stuff, but her punches consume MP, I think. What this coverage says about it is, seems she fights using martial arts moves. The exact system hasn't been decided yet, but maybe she'll consume health instead of magic to attack? The series is called Madou Monogatari, but in a way having a character who can't use magic at all as a protagonist in a game like this is pretty compile-ish in the end. Also, Minotauros was planned to appear in the game, but just never showed up anywhere in the final game. Yeah, I'll cover this more in depth someday once Madou ARS gets a translation patch and I can actually play it. The next thing to discuss, I have no idea how I missed this since I've actually known about this for ages but never had been provided a translation. But anyway, Puyo Puyo Sun was to have a taunt feature that was entirely scrapped. Yeah, the idea was that you would get 1 taunt per round, and the taunt would appear on your opponent's field, obstructing their vision. It was meant to be a strategic feature, to make your opponent misdrop at a crucial moment to help in getting an edge in. It's unknown as to why this feature was cut. I personally would love this finally to be included in whatever the next Puyo Puyo game is. That'd be pretty funny. While there's nothing left over in the files to any version of Sun regarding this taunt feature, the graphics for several characters' taunts including Lagnus, Draco, Kikimora, Skatadara, Shezo, Nohoho, and Arl were shown in the guidebook to the PS1 version of the game. And just while I'm talking about that guide, 2 things of interest to me for this video that are also shown in here are concept drawings of how the game could have potentially looked, which is pretty neat, as well as this concept art for Lagnus showing some prototype designs. If you know me, you'll find I often really like and sometimes prefer prototype designs to a lot of characters I'm fond of, but I actually do not like these Lagnus ones at all. I'm very glad they settled with what they did for his final design. Jumping ahead, Puyo Puyo 7 had something I missed in the last video. Apparently Risukuma has a story mode icon present in the files to the DS version of the game, indicating he was planned to be playable in the game's story mode originally, and for whatever reason, wasn't. Thank you to Magalore3100 in the comments to the last Puyo Cut content video for bringing this up. In a similar vein, a brief thing I missed in the last video was that Puyo Puyo Chronicle has files pertaining to unused Street Pass functionality, as well as a replay save feature. Not being able to save replays in Chronicle when pretty much every other Puyo game from Sega allows you to do so is pretty weird, but that aside, losing Street Pass functionality is a shame, because Street Pass was like the best feature ever. I sorta get why it was probably cut though. This game was a fairly late release for the 3DS, so Sega probably just didn't care to add all that. Anyways, thank you to Armando for pointing this out, as well as providing these graphics from the game's files. For the next game, I want to discuss something sort of weird. Weird in the sense that it's not technically cut content as far as we can confirm, but it might be. Really, I've wanted to discuss this little theory for a while now, and I don't think there's a better place for me to talk about this, so here it goes. I gotta preface this by giving a little backstory to Puyo Puyo Champions. So, Champions is a really odd game. It's possibly one of the lowest budget Puyo Puyo games. There's only 2 gameplay modes, it's pretty much built off of Puyo Puyo Tetris 1, which in turn was built off of Puyo Puyo 20th Anniversary. Almost all of the artwork is reused from the mobile gacha game Puyo Puyo Quest, a lot of which is also doubly reused from Puyo Puyo 20th Anniversary, and overall it is just a very, very basic Puyo Puyo experience. It doesn't even have a story mode. This is all because in Japan, and some other Asian countries, the game is actually called Puyo Puyo Esports, and is marketed as the go-to game for people wanting to play Puyo Puyo competitively, hence the lackluster visual presentation. Hell, the Japanese version of the game even reuses all of its voice lines from Quest as well. Unfortunately though, Sega in Western countries does not care whatsoever about marketing Puyo to the esports crowd, so to us this game is particularly bizarre, but I'm getting off topic. I mentioned that almost all of the artwork is reused from Quest. Let me explain what that means. In Quest, you collect cards of the characters, which can go up to be 7 stars in strength or rating or whatever. These 7-star pieces of artwork are what are used as the character select and strongest chain artwork for Champions. However, they're not actually the exact same pieces of artwork, as the 7-star Quest pieces of art actually have slightly different designs to the 4-star and below pieces of art. I guess in an effort to make the characters' designs in Champions consistent, they edited this 7-star art to use the same designs as the 4-star and below art. There was one character who didn't have 7-star art yet, and actually got brand new art made for them for use in Champions. That was Carbuncle. This art was eventually added as a Puyo Esports specific card for Quest. However, despite already having 7-star art, Satan also had new art drawn of him for Champions, being the only character in the game with this distinction. I think he got new art because his 7-star art actually retains his design present in his 4-star and below art. Anyways, now that I've explained all that, I can now finally introduce this. It's a fan. Well, what's significant about this fan is that it's one produced to promote Puyo Quest and Puyo Esports, and thus most of the roster of Puyo Esports is present on here, with a few characters like Lagnus and Harpy sadly being excluded. Regardless, 6 characters are shown here that aren't playable in Esports/Champions, however. Those being Feli, Klug, Ocean Prince, Ladell, Misericord, and Ekolo. For the first 4 characters, these are their 7-star pieces of art from Quest, but edited to have their designs from their 4-star and below art. As for Misericord and Ekolo, this art is completely new and has never been seen before or since. So, what I am insinuating and speculating on is that these 6 characters were planned to be playable in Puyo Puyo Esports, but were all cut. In the released version of Champions/Esports, not counting the bonus characters added like 2 years after release, the playable roster consists of 6 whole characters who had only ever appeared in Puyo Puyo Quest previously. The theory is that these 6 characters were actually picked later in development and replaced the 6 characters that were seen on this fan. This art on the fan has never been utilized anywhere else, which is whatever with the 7-star art edits. But the brand new art of Accord and Ekolo that's in line with the new art of Carbuncle and Satan, why would this art exist just to be used on this one piece of merchandise and for nothing else? Sega are really not ones to make brand new Puyo Puyo art for merchandise and instead just reuse art from 20th anniversary or Quest for everything most of the time. So I have complete belief that this wasn't just made for this fan. But yeah, if all this art was indeed meant for esports originally and went unused due to Sega wanting to promote those Quest original characters, it'd honestly make a whole lot of sense, at least it would to me. But I've spent way too long talking about this game, so I better move on. And by move on, I hope you're ready for me to talk about Puyo Puyo Quest for just a little longer. Oh boy. So from 2013 up until 2017, there was this arcade version of Puyo Puyo Quest available to play, fittingly titled Puyo Puyo Quest Arcade. I don't really know a whole lot else about it. Puyo Quest is hardly my cup of tea to begin with, but either way, what I'm about to discuss is pretty interesting to me. So a lot of characters in Quest are returning compile era ones. Think of whatever character you enjoyed from a compile Puyo game, and they're probably in Quest. That said, some characters for one reason or another just never made it into Quest. But within the files to Puyo Puyo Quest Arcade is something interesting. There's this image that seems to be an early mock-up of the game's party organization system. All of this art is pretty preliminary and doesn't resemble the art that the game did end up going with, and all the characters shown here are from Puyo Puyo 2. And look, there's Sukiya Podes. He's not in Puyo Quest at all. How strange is it that he was cut? Even stranger though is that there's actually one singular character not present in Puyo 2, it's present in this image, that being Wraith. Wraith barely even exists as a Puyo character. You may remember me mentioning in the first Puyo Cut content video that she was planned to appear in the Sega Saturn version of Puyo Puyo 2, but was cut there as well, leaving her only Puyo Puyo game appearance as Super Nazo Puyo, Lulu's Rue. However, the most notable Puyo-related thing about Wraith is that she somehow received a plushie. Nonetheless, it's sad to see her have been cut from Quest as well. Thank you to Armando once again for discovering and pointing out to me this unused content. So, about that new Puyo game that came out this year. Yeah, so Puyo Puyo Puzzle Pop exists alright. For the purposes of this video, I'm not going to delve into really anything about it, but data miners have been able to find a couple of early files hidden within the game, so screw it, let's cover them real quick. So there's dummy graphics of Arl, very amusing looking, as well as an early cutscene. Looking at the script for this, it was very rudimentarily translated, as Carbuncle's name is written out as Karkun at one point, and both Amity and Arl's names are misspelled. Also, the line, "compete in the Puyo Puyo game," is funny, gives me the same vibe as that one official tweet from the Fortnite account. Then after that it just says, "this is test," and the rest of the lines just say, "test." Brilliant stuff, right guys? Now that I've finally gone through all the Puyo games to be featured in this video, there's something bigger I want to cover now, as the final feature for this video. So back a long while ago, I made an admittedly pretty crappily made look at how Madou Monogatari Saturn changed over time from its pre-release to the final game. If you don't know what that game is, it's basically a traditional RPG with almost the entire cast of compile Puyo characters in it. I like it a lot. The game went through countless changes before release, as seen in prototype gameplay footage from trailers, and I hope that someday a prototype copy of the game would resurface, so we could finally have a better look at this early and unused material. But, as of this year, it has been discovered that a huge plethora of this material is still in the files to the final game, and I am so grateful to finally have the opportunity to cover that all now. Without further ado, let's get into all that. I think I'll start with what I consider least crazy and work my way up to what's most interesting. So to begin, we have these map sprites of Arl walking in all directions. In pre-release footage, we can see that Arl was able to traverse all around the map overworld by walking around to key locations. In the final game, only Lagnus in the prologue is able to walk around like this, and only these front-facing Arls are used when picking where to go on the map screen. In addition, some pre-release images show that your party would follow behind you in this map overworld, and the completely unused sheets of Rulu and Shezo sprites are still intact. Next up is the proper overworld's character sprites. In Madou Saturn's pre-release, it can be observed that the game would have a very traditional style of gameplay on the overworld, which, in other words, means you'd be able to walk in 8 directions. However, the final game has this isometric 4-direction system. That being said, the sprites for many of the characters from this earlier version of the game are still intact. Firstly is Arl, of course, who has 4 whole sheets of sprites, complete with walking sprites in all directions and plenty of event graphics. Some of these, for whatever reason, are weirdly not complete. Next is Rulu, who has a bunch of event graphics. Notice though how she doesn't have walking sprites for all directions. Then there's Shezo, who only has these sprites of him teleporting as seen in the trailer for the game. Likewise, there's these ones of Minotauros, which are just the ones seen in the trailer. Same with these Skeleton T ones. If you're not catching on to what I'm hypothesizing, I'm thinking that this is all suggesting that this pre-release version of the game really mustn't have gotten too far into development before they restarted the whole overworld pretty much. Like, they got tons of Arl sprites done, then a good amount of Rulu ones done, and then the rest were only done to show off in the trailer. Anyways, there are some Carbuncle sprites from this build also in the files too, as well as these Puyos. The trailer shows that they were to be used during this dungeon puzzle, and the final game does have an equivalent part to this included in Satan's Tower. The last thing of note regarding this overworld is that there's also sprites for a cut character, that being Nasu Grave, the miserable eggplant man himself. You might recall in the 1997 trailer for the game, you can indeed see him at one point. Here's those overworld sprites, including these unseen ones where he holds up a sign. Man, I still can't believe they cut him from the game. Fuck you, Compile. Anyways, this is a good opportunity to pivot to the next segment of interest, unused battle sprites. Nasu Grave's battle sprites are also still in the files to the game. Look at him attacking with that drum of his. In addition, it's worth pointing out his voice lines that were to be used in battle are still intact in the files too. As for the other unused battle sprites, oh boy, there's a lot of crazy stuff. In the 1997 pre-release footage, there's this weird early battle footage of Kikimora, Witch, and Draco, all fighting the main party, and notably Draco is using her regular outfit here rather than her one created for Madou Saturn. Well, all these sprites from this footage are present in the files. The Draco ones are of course radically different to her final game sprites. Kikimora has minor differences, and Witch's ones are near identical to the final game. The sprites to this unused axe-wielding knight guy that can be seen in the trailer are left over in the files too. No idea why this enemy was cut, but it's nice their sprites still exist. Also in the shorter sizzle reel of footage from 1997 is this sand golem guy. Upon doing some research, I found that they appear to be an unused sand variant of a pre-existing Madou enemy, that being Frost Giant from Madou ARS. Anyways, a bunch of the Sand Giant sprites are also in the files, despite them not being used as an enemy in the final game. And finally, for unused battle sprites, there are 2 characters not seen in any pre-release footage or screenshots, Zombie and Fire Element. You should remember Zombie from his appearances in Puyo Puyo 1 and 2, but Fire Element never appeared in nearly as many games, his most notable appearance being in Madou ARS. Before any digging through Madou Saturn's files was done, we had no idea these 2 characters were supposed to be in the game. Both of these characters are weird though. They don't really feel like they match the art style of the game. They look really chibi compared to the other battle sprites, so maybe that's why they got cut? Both of their sheets seem pretty complete, and Zombie even has environmental sprites, like dirt and dust, so I suspect these 2 weren't cut early in development either. What a strange thing. But at least these sprites were left in the files. Unfortunately, not every sprite unused in the final game as seen in the trailers seems to be left over, however. Notably, younger Lagnus's battle sprites don't seem to be anywhere. However, as consolation for that, his voice clips that would have been used are still in the files, and reveal he would have pretty much had the same moveset as his 17-year-old self. And now that I've gone over all that unused gameplay stuff, I have 2 more crazy random things from the files that I want to share. The first is this. The file name to this thing is Tanida.cel. Tanida is the name of the director of Puyo Puyo Sun, and while I'm not sure of his role in developing Madou Saturn, it's pretty clear that this had to have been some sort of inside joke amongst the game's developers. Still, extremely bizarre though. and the second are these very crude and silly pieces of art of Arl, Satan, Nasu Grave, and Skeleton T. I have no idea who made these, but they're in the files. Internally, they seem to have been stored with some of the graphics used during the Puyo card minigame, so perhaps these were meant to be some sort of placeholder images? It's so weird, but seeing this art, however, is awesome either way. And as far as unused assets in Madou Saturn's files goes, that's kinda it regarding anything interesting. There are a few more missed things not from the files that go unused in the final game, so let's tack on a little bonus since who the hell knows when I'd get the chance to talk about this stuff again. So back in 2020, a former artist for Compile, Takeshi Okamoto, shared some game art for Madou Saturn before it was digitized and implemented into the game. A lot of this art was the dialogue portraits found in the game, and it can be observed that some expressions seen are not found in the final game. There's ones for Arl, Shezo, Rulu, and Minotauros. Some of the areas not seen in the final game have some concept art available, such as this area called the Mountain Pass Barrier. And finally, this is more of a tidbit rather than anything, but funnily enough, this promotional sticker sheet included with the magazine Shogaku Senensai that includes art of a bunch of the characters in their Madou Saturn outfits, includes Nasu Grave amongst everyone else. Thank you for watching to the end. Before I go, I want to give a massive shout out to my buddy Toasty, as she was the individual responsible for managing to get into Madou Saturn's files, and not only finding so many unused sprites, but also ripping and reconstructing them. As far as hacking Madou Saturn goes, we weren't actually able to rip palettes to sprites. A lot of this unused stuff either uses final game equivalent palettes ripped while emulating the game, or are estimated recreations painstakingly done by Toasty. So anyways, if you see her around or anything, be sure to thank her for the hard work documenting this stuff. While I'm still on the topic of Madou Saturn, I'd like to informally announce on the behalf of our very small team that we are looking into finally making an English translation patch for Madou Saturn. It is still extremely preliminary. So far the most progress we've been able to make is replacing a few battle graphics with English versions. But hey, this English logo made by Sam the Salmon looks pretty damn good implemented into the game, I think. So anyway, if you were at all interested in contributing to this English translation project, whether it be hacking or translation help, or even if you know how to rip palettes from the game's files, please get into contact with me. Feel free to DM me on Twitter about it, or on Discord if you prefer. I think that's all that I wanted to cover. If you enjoyed watching this, consider subscribing, and join me for the next time I talk about Puyo Puyo, where I discuss the period where the official account accidentally set their location to a random Wendy's in Idaho in the Skatadara meal that had traces of lead in it.